Easy, easy.
Welcome back, I'm Raiden from Bluewood Gaming, and today is the first actual episode of Raiden's Reviews. This is the new format that I will have for my reviews going forward, and with this being the first episode of it, expect the format to change more in the future as I kind of settle into it. I'm adding this kind of structure to my reviews so that it's not just 20 minutes of me rambling on about a game and different pros and cons about it. I'm actually putting more structure into it. So let's get into the first episode of Raiden Reviews. This time, it's Red Dead Redemption 2. The first section I'm going to cover is graphics. Now, I've heard some people say that the graphics in this game are revolutionary or the best that they've ever seen. And while I don't hold that same sentiment, the graphics in this are very, very good. The footage that you're seeing was recorded on an original PlayStation 4, so if you happen to have a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One S or X, then it's going to look even better than that. This is also the first time in a very long time where I have stopped playing to just admire the view that I had out in the distance. Being up on a mountain and looking over the whole game world is awe-inspiring, and I don't say that often. While the great open vistas are amazing to look at, the game also shows astonishing levels of detail in the small things as well. In an article published by Vulture before the release of the game, Rockstar Vice President Dan Houser said that there were 300,000 animations in the game, and I believe him. I don't think that I've seen more natural-looking characters and animations in any other game ever. Everything that my character does looks extremely natural, and it's varied every time that I do it. Everything, including mundane things like opening up doors or just walking down the road, you can see differences in it, and it is just astonishing how much work actually went into this. One of the best examples that I can think of is when your character is moving through thick terrain, and by that I mean mud and snow. And you can really tell when your character is struggling a little bit, when it gets deeper, and how he can more easily move through it when it gets more shallow, and it looks just so natural, and you can see the work that actually went into it. Personally, in terms of graphics and animation, I think that this is really the peak of it for this console generation, and I think that it's going to take the new generation for anybody to be able to beat just the level of graphical fidelity and the sheer naturalness of the animations in this game. I do have to warn you though, if you are playing on an original PS4 or an original Xbox One, you will see some frame drops when you go into the cities, and this is fairly consistent, although it is not too game hindering. It is only just a few frames, and it is slightly noticeable, but it is just fine to play through. Next, let's move on to sound, music, and voice.
Excuse me, Alden. Here, get on the train. Get your bags, miss. I got this.
And once again, Rockstar has hit it out of the ballpark in this category. This is the first time where walking through deep mud actually sounds like walking through deep mud. This is the first time where walking through snow actually sounds like walking through thick snow. And on top of that, in the snowy areas, it captures the eerie silence that you get in actual heavily snowed areas. There's one place in the sound, though, that I immediately knew was just the best that I've ever heard, and that is gunshots. Think about how often you've heard gunshots in games. This is still the best that I think that I've ever heard. There's just the extra tiny details that just make it so much better. If you don't know, shooting in the mountains and in the open plains and in the forests all kind of add some different sounds to a gunshot. In the open plains, you can hear this bit of a tiny echo. You can hear it a bit more in the mountains. And in the woods, it's actually kind of dampened quite a bit. And that all happens in this game. But there's one very specific part that I think nobody is really going to listen to specifically, but I heard it and I was amazed when I heard it because I don't think any other game has done this. Since most everybody here probably doesn't know, I'll go over this. If you were being shot at from a distance, the sound does not work the way that you would think it would. Most people think that the way that they would hear it is gunshot, bullet whizzing by, and then bullet hitting something. But in fact, the way that it actually works is in reverse. You hear the bullet hit something, then you hear the kind of sound wave of the bullet traveling, and then you hear the gunshot, just because the bullet is traveling faster than the speed of sound. No other game that I've played has gotten that correctly, but I did distinctly hear that several times in this game. And it shows that Rockstar knows how to put in the tiny details to add just the total package of immersion. So now let's go on to music. And this is really the only place that Rockstar stumbles with Red Dead Redemption 2. According to the composer for Red Dead Redemption 2, Woody Jackson, there are 192 interactive mission scores and then a handful of extra songs where they brought in outside talent. While the music is good, almost all of the interactive mission scores take a backseat to the actual gameplay and really kind of blend together, almost as they should, but none of them are memorable. The only memorable songs in the game are where they brought in outside talent, with people such as D'Angelo, Willie Nelson, and Josh Homme, with the most memorable song in the entire game being D'Angelo's only song titled Unshaken. Overall, I think that I will still pick up the soundtrack when it is finally released, but I just wish that there were more memorable songs in the game besides the few made by outside artists. And now let's move on to voice. And as you would expect from a Rockstar game, the voice acting in this is phenomenal. They even got some of the original voice actors from Red Dead Redemption 1 to come back and voice their characters again for Red Dead Redemption 2, such as Rob Wythoff and Benjamin Brian Davis as John Marston and Dutch Vanderlyn, respectively. And once again, they've gone with a relatively unknown actor, Roger Clark, to voice our main character, Arthur Morgan. Before Red Dead Redemption 2, Roger Clark has only been in one other video game, being Shellshock 2 Blood Trails from 2009. In that same Vulture article that I quoted earlier, Dan Houser also said that there was 500,000 lines of dialogue in the game, making this the longest script in entertainment history. To put 500,000 lines of dialogue into context, Final Fantasy VII only had 96,000 lines of dialogue. Fallout 4 only had 111,000 lines of dialogue. The longest game script in existence before Red Dead Redemption 2 was an adult graphic novel called World Love Organization that had 148,000 lines of dialogue. If we look over in the world of books, the longest book ever recorded is the ancient Indian epic called Mahabharata, which clocks in at 200,000 lines, although not all of those are dialogue. Or to put it in more practical terms, if you took the entire 4-book series of Lord of the Rings, you would have to times that by 8, and you would just then get to the point of how long the script is for Red Dead Redemption 2. It is absolutely astonishing, and it is a record that I am sure Rockstar will be holding for a very long time. And now let's move on to the story of the game, and do not worry, there is not any spoilers in this video. You play as a character named Arthur Morgan, who is the main enforcer and main gun of the Dutch Vanderlyn gang. And you get to follow him in the tumultuous journey that the Vanderlyn gang goes through to end up where they are in the first Red Dead Redemption. To avoid any spoilers, I will leave it at that, but I do just want to end off this section by saying that this is the most that I've cared about characters in a very long time. Mostly when I finish off games, I just move on to the next one without thinking back about the characters and their journeys through the game. But that wasn't the case in Red Dead Redemption 2. After I had finished it, I had a several hour long conversation with a friend of mine about the characters in this game. And this game might have the most well written characters in any game ever. I would get into details, but that would start reaching into spoiler territory, and really you just need to play this game to follow the characters through the journey, as it is well worth the time to play through this, just for the story and the characters. And now let's move on to gameplay. And what you see is really kind of what you get, but you may have actually played games very similar to this before. The three games that really stand out to me as being huge influences on this is Red Dead Redemption 1, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Max Payne 3. But Rockstar already said that they took elements from each of those games to put them together to get what we have in Red Dead Redemption 2. If you played the first Red Dead Redemption, then the mission structure will seem very familiar to you. Essentially, the game is full of points of no return, so you can just run through the story, but if you do that, then you will cut off side missions that you could do, and you won't be able to do them if you pass a certain point in the story. The general feel of the character and the world is very similar to Grand Theft Auto 5, although they did tighten everything up and it does not feel as loose. I can't really think of a better word to describe it, but the controls are more tight than they were in Grand Theft Auto 5, but they are very similar to how they were in Grand Theft Auto. And finally, the guns and the shooting is taken almost exactly from Max Payne 3 with a few small tweaks to fit it to that Western theme. Now, the handling of the guns is where most people have complained about the game, and I found a very simple answer to that. If you go into the settings, you will see that the dead zone on the controllers is actually set to the highest that it possibly can be, making the thumbsticks feel very unresponsive because they have a huge dead zone and you have to move them a whole lot for tiny movements to actually happen. The other thing that you can change in the settings is the lock-on for the weapons. At the very beginning, the weapons are set to this hybrid lock-on mode where it's mostly free aim, but it will help you snap to the targets if you are just a little bit off. You can then change that to be completely free aim, which I do not recommend on a controller, or you can bump it up to something more similar to Grand Theft Auto 5's aim assist, which is what I personally used, as I find that to be the most helpful with a controller. And I really hope that they set it to a automatic free aim when it comes over to PC eventually, because that slight aim assist will feel very weird when you're playing on PC when that version finally releases. And now let's go to my final thoughts and my score for this game. Overall, I think that this is an amazing game, and this game truly shows that you can have an immersive experience without VR. It can be done, and this is the first time that's been done extremely well, and I think that for years we're going to look back and say that Red Dead Redemption 2 was one of the great games of this console generation. And it is a serious Game of the Year contender. The only reason why I wouldn't put it as a firm Game of the Year yet is because we have not seen the Red Dead Online that's going to release later this year. And speaking of the online section, I will have a separate video covering that when it finally does release. We are supposed to have an open beta starting in November, but we have no specific date on when that will start or when the full Red Dead Online will finally become available. So that may be this year, that may not be this year, and that will truly affect whether or not Red Dead Redemption 2 is Game of the Year or not. And let's move on to my score of the game. If you don't know already, I give a game 1 of 3 scores. Either buy now, wait for a sale, or don't bother. And this game is firmly a buy now. The story alone makes this game incredible to play through. Even though I don't suspect that many people are going to play through it a second time, The story alone is great, and it is amazing to just see these characters evolve over time. And anybody that buys the game will have access to the open beta of Red Dead Online coming sometime in November, and then eventually we will have the full Red Dead Online. So I think everybody is going to get their money's worth out of this game. And that is it for my review of Red Dead Redemption 2. Like I said earlier, I will have another video when Red Dead Online comes out. Hopefully this new format for my reviews works. You will see that this is an entirely new playlist on my channel. I will move all of my old reviews onto that. I will have a separate video talking about all the changes in my channel. And as always, I'm Ryan from Blue Water Gaming. I'll see you guys in the next one.